Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Keisha. I am a psychology major, and as I read the Bible, I can see psychology principles in the Bible. So I created this channel as a way of sharing those principles. I wanted to start out talking about development. So largely who I am as a kid is driven by my adult caregivers, the experiences that I'm having at home, in my neighborhood, and at school, and to a larger extent, my culture. What does my culture also tell me about myself? And so we add into that experience that kids are also egocentric. And so that means that if I am having good experiences with my adult caregivers, with my environment, with my school and neighborhood, and to a larger extent, what culture says about me, I'm going to believe that I'm a good person. And if I'm having the opposite experience, I am having bad experiences with my adult caregivers, traumatic, chaotic experiences with my caregivers. I'm having traumatic and chaotic experiences at home, at school, in my neighborhood, and also what culture thinks of me, then I'm going to regard myself as a bad person. And then the sum total of those experiences really shape our self-esteem and our self-worth and who we are as adults. And so looking at that, if I am had bad experiences, then I have to know that it is not anything against who I am as a person. It is that the environment that I grew up in, the people that took care of me, they did not have it for whatever reason to build a worthy self-esteem. And part of adulthood is that if I did not get it and was not given a certain characteristic, then I have to go after it and search for it myself, because my perception and what I perceive of myself is related to people and environments that did not and could not support me having a good self-esteem, a good self-worth, but that is an indictment on my environment. That is not an indictment on my personhood. Who I am was built in childhood, but if those people, the people and the environment did not support a good self-perception, then I have to pick up the tools and figure it out as an adult, that my self-worth is intrinsic, it is within me, and it does not and cannot be attended to and defined by my environment. So last week I watched a YouTube video, and in that sermon, the pastor mentioned Cain and Abel. And I don't know, like that really just like stuck with me. So I went back and read the story of Cain and Abel, and that is what I wanted to talk about today. So in the character of Abel are parts of self-esteem, and in the things that Cain lacks are also parts of self-esteem, that if we put both those things together, they actually equal self-esteem. And so I'm going to talk about what I saw when I read the story. I'm going to talk about how are those traits normally developed. And then I'm going to talk about how we can give those traits to ourselves if we notice that those traits are not in us. So the story of Cain and Abel is in Genesis chapter 4, and I'm going to be discussing verses 1 through 8. So the story of Cain and Abel goes that Cain and Abel are brothers. They're both working at their gifting, their purpose, what God has given them to do. And so we see that Abel is a shepherd. He is raising animals. And we see that Cain is a farmer, and he is growing crop. Now, there came a time where they were going to offer sacrifices to God. And so we see that Abel brought the best lamb as a sacrifice, and that God accepted his sacrifice. But we see that Cain brought crop as a sacrifice, and God did not accept his sacrifice. And so we see that we see God issue a warning that tells Cain, if you do it right, you will be accepted. But he said that if you are not careful, sin is waiting at your door. Now we see that Cain becomes angry at his brother Abel, who does not even have anything to do with the dynamic that exists between him and God. But we see that Cain becomes angry, and he takes that anger out on his brother Abel, and he kills him. So I was like, what does Abel embody? And so when I look at Abel, what I see is a person that is working to the best of his ability. So he is raising animals to the best of his ability, and he is sacrificing to God, and he is willing to give God his best. And for me, it feels like, what does the person need to show up at their work, to show up and at their task that they are doing, and they give their absolute best effort? And in their relationships, so as they navigate life, in their family relationships, in their friend relationships, in their journey throughout life, what do they need in order to show up and give their absolute best effort? Well, the thing that they need is, I need to think really good things about myself, because I'm showing up in all of these areas of life as my best self, vulnerably showing up as my best self, with no idea of if those things are going to be accepted by my culture. So Abel needs a positive self-image. I need to think the absolute best of myself. I need to think that I am universally good. In the story of Cain, what allowed him to be able to harm his brother? And really, because as we look, we're like, hey, like, your brother does not have anything to do with the way that you feel. But if I lack emotional intelligence, I will blame someone else because I have negative emotions, and I will actually take those emotions out on that person because I am not a good steward of my own emotional well-being. And the other thing that Cain lacked was, I don't have a way of being able to make mistakes and show up imperfect and not make that mean something about me. That I don't know how to steward that information. Okay, so how is a good self-image developed? How is Abel able to show up as his best self to work? He is able to show up and present his best self when he works, and he is able to show up in his relationships as his best self. How is he able to do that? Well, when we are a kid and our adult caregivers are attuned to our needs and wants as we travel through life, we're building trust. We're also building self-trust. And then as I'm navigating, my adult caregivers and my environments are edifying the goodness inside of me. They're edifying my unique character. They're edifying my personhood. And so as an adult that has been reared with a good self-perception, I am an adult that has a positive self-image. And I will say this part, that if I don't get the validation, I don't get all of the things that I need as a child, I will also become an adult that needs my environment and people to validate me, because my self-image is built in childhood, but it is exemplified in adulthood. And if I have not been in an environment that actually enriched me, I'm going to be an adult that needs my environment to validate me. And the more that I actually need that validation, the more I'm probably going to be attracted to environments that don't have that. And I'm going to be attracted to environments that actually invalidate who I am and make me feel worse, environments that don't nurture my true value. And so this part, what did Cain need in order to be successful? So Cain needed to be able to make mistakes and know that mistakes are actually just information gathering, and to be able to do it again. And Cain also needed to be emotionally intelligent. He needed to know and be able to have some self-awareness around how he feels. And then he needs to be able to self-regulate. And he lacked both of those things. And those things allowed him to kill his brother. So what if we don't believe good things about ourselves? How can we as adults build that characteristic? So we start with the belief that our environment did not give us the things we need, not because that was an indictment on our self-worth, our value, who we are as people. It does not in any way reflect our personhood. It is instead an indictment on the environment that was not ready to properly steward us and give us the things that we need. So we apply a lot of grace to that thing and know that this is something that we are going to have to build and give to ourselves. So a good self-image, a positive self-concept starts with the first building block of self-awareness. And so that is realizing that everybody in the world comes with certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And we are to look at ourselves and gauge that with grace and a lot of unconditional love. So I am the sum total of my strengths and my weaknesses. And I have great things that I'm going to be really good at, and I'm going to have things that are going to be weaknesses. And I observe all of those things in a non-judgmental way. They are just the sum total of who I am as a person. We can realize that those things can be things that we may want to change, but we start at a place of self-acceptance, a place of unconditional love. And so we look at our weaknesses and we can say that maybe we would want to strengthen those weaknesses, but we do it in compassion and love. So we can look at our weaknesses, and in that acceptance, we can still want to move the gauge. We can say that some of the things that we are not necessarily good at, we can want to change them. But the point of it is that I regard myself unconditional. I give myself unconditional love, and I change those things that I want to change and make better. I observe them from a place of non-judgment. The second part that we can look at is self-compassion. And that is that I am giving myself a lot of grace and mercy when I observe my character traits. That I regard myself as kind, as sympathetic, and as helpful. I regard myself as good, even knowing that there could be things about me that I want to change and I want to grow and I want to make better. I apply self-compassion and empathy. It means that I am accepting and forgiving of myself. And how I know I definitely need these things if I have a really harsh inner critic. If I have my inner critic that says, "Why did you do that? You're stupid," or "I hate when you do that," or any of those things, that is a clue that we need to apply self-compassion, because the story of everybody is that we need a lot of grace. The story of God. He accepts us, and we need a lot of grace and a lot of mercy to live a well and exceptional life. Okay, so this next point came from a book called Self-Esteem, and it was by Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning. And they said that a good sign of a good self-image is that I have healthy values. And they define healthy values are life-enhancing values. They are rules that we live by that edify us. And they said the difference in that is that if I have a very rigid belief system, the more rigid my beliefs, the lower my self-esteem. And they said that they defined these rigid rules as actually they make us feel worse about ourselves. They define them as, they call them shoulds, and they are things that I just I just bring into existence off the cuff. They call them unexamined and unrealistic rules that we want to live by. An example would be, I want to exercise 5 days a week. And if I don't meet those 5 days a week, I would actually beat myself up and make myself feel worse about not meeting that rule. And never mind the fact that I actually am a mom. I am a single mom. I am in school full time and I work full time. And between all of those duties, there's no way that I can possibly go to the gym 5 days a week. And so it is just an unrealistic measure that I now use to gauge me. And when I don't meet those standards, I will actually beat myself up about it. And so a healthy value in the meantime would be that I am going to go to the gym, that exercise is important to me, and that I am going to go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week. And that is a good goal and a good measure when it takes into consideration all the other responsibilities that I have. And so another barometer, meaning that I can actually move that a little further. I can say, now I'm out of school. I don't have school. Kids don't have school. We are in summer. So of course I can ramp that up and say that I can go to the gym 5 days a week. So Abel's positive self-concept, to believe positively in myself, is to accurately assess my strengths and weaknesses in compassion, and to live by healthy values that are actually affirming and life-giving. Okay, so now what are some of the things that Cain needed in order to not make the decision that he made? Cain needed to be okay with making mistakes. So if I am a person that holds myself to the standard of perfection, and if I mess up, I dissolve into fear and shame, then I'm a person that is going to stay in my comfort zone and I'm never going to grow. Because to grow inherently means that I am going to have to take on a skill set, a belief, a behavior that is outside of my comfort zone, and it's also outside of what I would normally do. And so if I am showing up brave and courageous, then I am going to have to be a person that gets okay with making mistakes. Because to make mistakes are information gathering, that as we make mistakes, we come away with new life lessons. So to make mistakes is to say that I am willing to grow and learn and move past my comfort zone. And they used a great definition. So I need to reframe mistakes. Mistakes are natural and valuable components of life. I need to learn from them and move on. Mistakes are teachers. They reflect growth. They are absolutely necessary for growth. You can't learn new skills without making mistakes, and mistakes are necessary feedback for the learning process. Mistakes have nothing to do with my self-worth or my intelligence. And what did Cain? Cain needed to realize that his anger, when it was directed at Abel, it was misdirected. And I have to be a good steward of my emotional well-being. And so I cannot make other people responsible for how I feel. So emotional intelligence is the ability to be able to hold space for your emotions and your emotional well-being, but I also can hold space for other people as well. And so sometimes if we did not get information, did I say that? If we did not get information in childhood, meaning that our parents did not validate us and co-regulate with us, then we are going to be adults that are not good stewards of our emotional well-being. And so how it works is I am allowed to express the gamut of emotions. So from anger all the way to joy and everything in between, our emotional response is normal. To have emotions is normal. And so what happens is, and it hardly ever probably happens, I'm like, I don't even think that I was a good steward of this until I learned it. So when I am a kid, so my parents will come in and they will validate my emotions, and then they will co-regulate with me. So when I am a kid, my parent will be like, I get angry. So I am kid Keisha and I get angry. And then my parent steps in and says, Keisha, you're angry. And then my parent says, let me give you the tools to steward your anger. And so my parents do that for every single emotion. When I'm crying, when I'm in pain, my parents says, you are in pain. They name it, they validate it, they make it acceptable, and then they tell me what to do. What tools do I need to handle the way I feel? And so if we did not have that, then sometimes we can have a lot of shame and a lot of fear behind my emotions and other people's emotions. But it is important to remember that our emotions tell us, they are information for us. And so if I find myself angry, then I have to develop the self-awareness to sit still in it and know, to increase my tolerance for discomfort, to be able to sit still in that emotion and figure out what it is telling me. And then I have to be able to self-regulate. I have to be able to figure out the tools to. And so after I feel those emotions, I understand that they are there to give me messages. And so if I am a good steward of my emotional well-being, I'm also a person that has to be able to self-regulate and self-soothe, but I also need trusted people within. I need relationships that can steward that emotion, that can help me co-regulate and manage that emotion. If it becomes too much for me, I can have safe people in my life to help me manage that emotion. And it is never good to disconnect from our emotions by being numb around feeling emotions or to shame our emotions. They are there to give us information about life, the life that we are living. All right, so I wanted to add the very important piece here. So once I have like all of those skills, I'm going to tell you that I went to therapy like a long time ago, and I know these therapy principles. I also bought like subscriptions, and like along the way, like really therapy and learning about different things has really like been like this hobby on steroids. But those values, the values that I have, the values that I'm learning, they never were seated in my life until I got the God piece correct. And so creating this God space in my life has meant that I am actually being driven into experiences that actually firm up and edify my personhood. And that when I added God and seated him in his correct position in my life, meaning that I am living life through my belief in God, that is when the principles that I learned really took root in a way that is really changing my life by changing my belief system. So we need God in our life, and reading the Bible has been where I have learned about the character of God. And it has also been where I have met God, where I have had this very intimate and loving relationship with him. And out of that has been that my character and my personhood have been strengthened in a way that I never could have given myself. To summarize it, we need God. We need God to help us firmly establish the strength of who we are. And we need to realize that who we are is intrinsic. It is inside of us, and our environment does not get to decide our personhood. And in fact, we should actually be after environments that edify us, that properly steward who we are as people, that value and appreciate the things that we bring to that environment. And we should leave environments that are not good stewards of our personhood. Thank you for watching my very first video. Bye.